The night air was thick with tension, and every step felt like a struggle against fate. Pain shot through my leg as I limped forward, sweat mixing with the dirt on my skin. I let out a sharp scream, knowing it wouldn't change anything but unable to hold it in. Keen squeezed my hand tightly, his grip the only thing anchoring me to reality. He was still stronger than I was, keeping us moving, though I could sense the fear in his trembling fingers. I never imagined I would find myself in a situation like this. Never prayed for it, never envisioned it. But here we were, living a nightmare. It had all started so simply, just a harmless trip to collect wooden sticks for a school project. We lived in an urban area still under development, where patches of overgrown land and small bushy areas were common. We ventured into the bush, unaware that we were stepping into the jaws of terror itself. At first, everything seemed fine. We laughed as we gathered the wood, teasing each other about who could carry the most. But then, the atmosphere shifted. The air felt heavier. A twig snapped behind us. Before we could turn, shadowy figures emerged from the darkness. The gang moved fast. Too fast. We barely had time to react before we were seized. They were a group of ruthless men, hardened by whatever dark deeds they committed in this forsaken wilderness. And they weren't alone. They had a child with them, a little girl, no older than 7. But unlike us, she wasn't crying. She wasn't afraid. She just walked alongside them, her small feet barely making a sound against the dirt path. The farther we walked, the more my hope drained away. Keen sobbed beside me, his voice choked with despair. But the little girl, she simply followed them, her expression eerily calm. Something about her unsettled me more than the gang itself. After what felt like hours, we reached a secluded hut deep within the forest. The leader of the gang approached an old man who stepped out of the hut, his eyes filled with curiosity as he studied us. Before he could speak, the gang leader explained, "The girl is for the sacrifice," he said, nodding toward the child. "We found these two along the way." The old man's wrinkled face twisted into a sinister smile. "Prepare them all for the ritual before dawn," he instructed. A cold dread washed over me. My heart pounded violently as I whispered silent prayers. Keen, overcome with fear, muttered his last prayers as tears streamed down his face. But the little girl, she just smiled. Not a nervous smile, not a helpless one. A knowing, confident smile. As the ritual hour approached, the air grew thick with the scent of burning incense. The old man began his enchantments, his voice rising and falling in eerie chants. The girl was led to the front of the shrine, but she showed no resistance, no fear. Then, for the first time, she spoke. Her voice was small, yet it carried an authority that sent shivers down my spine. "If you will use me for your sacrifice," she said, her eyes locked onto the old man's, "you have to use Jesus first." The words struck like lightning. A sudden, violent wind tore through the shrine, extinguishing the torches and shaking the wooden structure. The old man gasped, his body convulsing before he collapsed to the ground, unmoving. The gang members, terrified and confused, scattered into the darkness, their courage crumbling before an unseen force. The little girl turned to us, her face calm as ever. Without hesitation, she knelt down and untied our restraints. Stunned, I stared at her. How did you do that?" I finally managed to ask. She smiled again, her eyes filled with something beyond understanding. "My mother taught me about God," she said softly. "She told me to always put Jesus first, so I did." My chest tightened. At that moment, something shifted inside me. I had never been a deeply religious person, but what I had just witnessed, There was no other explanation. I wanted to know this, Jesus she spoke of, to trust in him the way she did. We didn't waste another second. We fled the hut, moving as fast as my injured leg would allow. As we approached the road leading home, the little girl stopped. She smiled at us one last time before disappearing down a separate path, her small figure swallowed by the night. I never learned her name, but I will never forget her, because that night she saved us, and in a way, she saved me too.